It is draft season in the NFL. Very pleased to be joined now by former Nevada offensive lineman. His trophy case probably looks better than yours. He is John Bender. Mr. Bender, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. I feel like this is a draft that you can appreciate because a lot of times it's okay, we're going to have 5 quarterbacks for the first 10 picks, and that's just how it's going to be. This year, you can make a case for no quarterbacks in the first round. We're probably going to get some, but this is more about the big fellas in the trenches. I feel like this is something you'd appreciate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think every year you look at the draft top to bottom, and is there 5 deserving quarterbacks in the first round? That's always a conversation. Is it 5 in the first 15? Is it 5 in the first 2 rounds? But I think what happens in the NFL is a lot of teams start reaching for quarterbacks because everybody's looking to have a franchise quarterback that they can build their team around. And that really helps them set their personnel, sets them get an identity as a football roster. And they kind of build the roster around how they build that quarterback room. So, I mean, I understand why teams do it, but, it'll be interesting to see this year what teams are able to do with, the other parts of the draft. And, I'm excited to see, where it goes and see which teams can build around, some future superstars either built on the O-line or the D-line.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a franchise quarterback at all in this. Like, unless Malik Willis hits best case scenario in every form of his development, it feels like there's a lot of dudes. So this guy will start for 5-10 years, which I guess might be what you want. But in terms of, this is a game changer, I don't know how many Pro Bowls are getting drafted from the quarterback position this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I don't think there's anybody that's going to be, right away next year go to the Pro Bowl as a rookie or anything like that. But if we were to look back at this draft in 3, 4, 5 years, who knows? I mean, we've seen some quarterbacks taken in late rounds. You look at Russell Wilson was a 3rd-round pick. You look at Kirk Cousins, he was a 5th-round pick. You look at some guys that there's an opportunity that they can get on the roster, build, and maybe it becomes for them, it becomes a great opportunity and they build and they become Pro Bowlers in the future. But yeah, if you're looking for a slam dunk first overall pick like Cam Newton was about a decade ago, there isn't anybody like that this year.
And it's interesting you mentioned Cam Newton because Carolina at 6, Atlanta at 8 really interest me for the reasons we just talked about. I don't think there is a top 10 quarterback in this draft, and those are 2 teams that probably need quarterbacks. But for both of them, and I guess more specifically Atlanta, because their need is everything. There isn't, aside from tight end, there isn't one position you would look at on Atlanta and say, okay, yeah, they don't need to draft this. They just need talent, and this almost is a draft set up for them. And so in my opinion, Carolina, Atlanta have the ability to shift how this goes, because you could see both those teams go quarterback and throw everything off. But I think this is a draft where they can start to build that foundation around whatever franchise quarterback they get, whether it's next year or in free agency or whatever. This feels like a foundation building draft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be pretty tight-lipped right now with other teams about what they want or what they might think they'll be able to get. I know trading down has been a really popular thing to do for a lot of teams that are in rebuilding mode because if you can have one draft pick or a whole slew of draft picks over the next 3 years, I know what a lot of teams would want is to have more chances to pick the right person. If they think pick 8 or 10 or whatever the situation might be isn't going to work out, would dropping down to 15 be okay? Is that going to be the same player? Is that going to be the same situation? But I think what some teams do, I think the best thing, you look at the Patriots and other teams like that, they draft the best player available. And if there's a player there that fits their scheme, that fits their personnel, and maybe he's not the position they quite want, well, if you draft a first-round D-end, all of a sudden your defense probably got a little better. That probably helped your linebacker room. That probably helped your secondary because now you're getting the quarterback a little faster. Well, if you're getting to the quarterback a bit more, well, maybe that helps your offense. You get more opportunities to get on the field. So football is definitely a team game, and you got to just build a better team. And if you can, get first-round picks on your O-line and D-line, whether it's, they get so for the Falcons, maybe they'll get a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon, who was, earlier this year, they were talking he might go first overall. I know that he's slipped a little bit now. He's closer to, 8 to 10 range. But if they can go get a player like that, he becomes a big difference maker. Well, maybe you can build the team around that. And, maybe your defense becomes a little better, like I said, with a few of the other areas. And, they can go from there.
I always love talking with you about the offensive line and the finer points of that, because I think like with wide receivers, it's the great route runner uses his speed. With quarterbacks, like big arm accuracy, and running backs explosive and all of this. And I feel like sometimes with offensive linemen, it's that boy, he got in the way really well. So I guess specifically for linemen who are at this point where these guys are the college kids, we've seen them play against high-end pass rushers. You had to face Ndamukong Suh. That's a very good pass rusher. But there's also some of these guys who are facing dudes who are working at Dick's Sporting Goods next year. So it's difficult to just like from production figure out like what like how these guys kind of mesh and how that will project to the next level. From a technique standpoint, what do you look at with some of these offensive linemen at this point in their journey?
So most of the best offensive linemen in college play left tackle. The reason they play left tackle is because there's only so many guys on an offensive line that you can kind of leave on an island, so to speak. So when you're in, most times in the offensive line in college, they're often in, slide protection, whether that's from the center over or from the guard over. So they're doing 3-man or 4-man slides. The reason they do that is to limit the penetration they can have from other teams' defensive lines. But at the same time, you're going to have to leave that left tackle on an island. Now, that left tackle that's left on an island, does he become a left tackle in the NFL? Not necessarily. There's only 32 left tackle positions that get paid big money, and oftentimes those guys are there for decades because they're freak talent and freak athletic ability. There's only so many guys that are 6'7", 330, and are as athletic as anyone you've ever met in your life. So when you look at a college football team, like I look at from my own perspective. From the University of Nevada, you look at a guy like Joe Bitonio was a left tackle at Nevada. You look at Austin Corbett was a left tackle at Nevada. Both of those guys are now a Super Bowl winning guard and a Pro Bowl guard. So I think that oftentimes you look at the tackles in college, they either play tackles in the pros or they get kicked inside and they start playing guard because they're a little bit bigger. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at some of the best athletes. You want guys that are moved. You want guys that are physical. You want guys that are leaders of men that, have won. If I was to look at a team that went 2-14, or 2-12 in college or whatever the situation might be, I wouldn't be as interested in them. But if you get a team that's won an Orange Bowl, that's won whatever the situation might be, a bowl game, won a conference championship, then I become really interested in those players because clearly they've won before. Clearly they know what that's about. Clearly they're able to build a team around them and go the right direction.
Well, and it's who you played against too. Like it's one thing. Oh yeah, this guy held up great against Delaware Tech, but right. If you're going out there against Georgia, who like some of their backups are going to be NFL players, that's kind of where it really shows what you're able to do now too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very interesting conversation because, I think when you look at the University of Alabama as a great example, most of their offensive linemen end up in the NFL. But does that help them as well, having a, future Pro Bowler beside them in college? You're just playing at a high level. You're playing at a high level with everybody around you. So I understand why the SEC drafts and develops a lot of offensive linemen, but then there's certain schools that draft and develop offensive linemen. You look at like the University of Wisconsin, they're an offensive line factory. You look at the University of Iowa, they're an offensive line factory. And there's some teams and some schools and universities that build their foundation of their program around the offensive line, and they find a lot of success doing that through the run game, through the pass game, and a lot of those players go on to have great NFL careers. I think at one time the University of Wisconsin offensive line was like they ran through all the players that were in the NFL and they were making like $60 million.
Oh wow!
And that was the offensive line at Wisconsin, 5 years ago. And they're averaging size 6'6", 330 across the board or whatever it might be. And there's some big boys that have done well. And if you're a high school offensive lineman, you're looking for a program like that to go to build your foundation.
You talked about guy like, okay, starts out as left tackle, but maybe I can slide him to a guard. Maybe I can slide him over to the right side. Are those easy transitions to make? Because I would imagine the responsibilities at one is different from the other, is different from the other. Is that a difficult transition for some players to make?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize when you watch football is that how much versatility that they're looking for in players and in offensive linemen specifically. When you're in college, there's a 60 to 64 man roster at away games. So everyone has a backup on the offensive line. So if I was to get hurt in college, I had a backup. When you get to the pros and you get down to that 53 man roster, well, now there's 8 offensive linemen, which is 5 starters and 3 backups for the whole line. They dress 3 quarterbacks. So that's 1 quarterback and 2 backups. And now
Yeah.
we have 3 backups for 5 positions on the offensive line. So that's why when you see, one player get hurt or twist an ankle, they have to shuffle the whole deck and move people all over the place. It becomes this big Tetris game of, oh, this guy's hurt, so we're going to move this guy there and that guy there, and then we're going to do all these different things. So yeah, I think versatility for offensive linemen equals dollars. And when you're getting ready for the pros, I was looked at when I was getting ready out of college, and they were always asking me, do you know how to snap? Do you know how to play guard? Do you know how to play tackle? Can you play on the right side? Can you play on the left side? What does all that look like? So yeah, there's definitely a growing transition and things like that. But at some point in time, most of these guys would have played a different position. And, it's rare that you come in out of college and you start as left tackle from day one as a freshman. Often you would start out at, maybe a right tackle, bounce over to left tackle later on in your career, or, maybe you start inside at guard. But, oftentimes when you look at the draft, the offensive tackles drafted, there's like 20 to 25 tackles drafted, 5 to 8 guards,
Yeah.
handful of centers. And it's not like there's more tackle positions than there is guards. It's just the tackles become guards at the pro level.
You mentioned before going through this process. Well, what is that like? I'm assuming now at 32, I'm probably not going to experience that. So what have, like, since the season's been wrapped up, what are these last few months? What have they been like for some of these kids?
So yeah, I mean, it's very unique for these guys because your schedule's so jam packed when you're in college. Like I remember getting up for 6 a.m. weights to go to school, have practice, school after, training table, classes, homework, whatever, and then that all stops. And now you have football, and that's it. So now these guys have been doing nothing since their bowl games except working out nonstop. So you work out 4 to 5 days a week. You're probably putting 20 to 25 hours a week in, just working on your body, working on your craft, working on your speed, your agility. We always joke around. We call the combine the Olympics for football players, where you have to go do this decathlon of all these different events. And, you got to try to, be strong, jump high, show your athleticism as best you can, and do all those different things. And, it's funny because, the guys that play in the national championship, for example, they would play until January 15th. They'd go to the combine February 20th. They only had a month to train for that. The guys that got bounced, and didn't get to go to the bowl game, they've been training since late November.
Yeah.
So they it's ironic how all that plays out, but those guys get a little bit longer timeline to build up and get strong and do all those different things. And then now it's kind of hurry up and wait, right? After you've done the pro day, after you've done the combine or whatever it might be, now you just wait. And every now and then a team calls you, you answer your phone, you're like, hey, what's up? I got a few calls. I remember I got a call from the Denver Broncos. They said, hey, we just want to make sure this is your right phone number. We want to ask you a few questions. They ask you a few questions. That's that. Some teams might fly you out. Some teams might bring you in. Some teams might come see you. Some teams might call your agent. It's just a lot of different, they're trying to poke and prod and get the best information they can so they can make the best decisions they can. And then, as me watching the draft, when I see the Broncos take a guard in the second round, I'm like, well, that didn't work out great for me.
Yeah. I'm starting to put a couple things together here, and that maybe doesn't add up for me all that well.
Exactly.
But yeah, I liked, I listened to a lot of draft podcasts, and Daniel Jeremiah was talking one day, and it was, I think a lot of this was magnified over the last couple of years during the pandemic. It's one thing when you have the schedule set out for you, like you said, oh yeah, I love football. You eat, sleep, breathe football. Okay. Well, now you're on your own. Now is your chance to prove to me that you eat, sleep, and breathe this shit. And some of these guys do, and some of them don't. And I think you can see some of these guys who have taken this seriously. There's a couple of guys now who the tape that they put out there during the season is great, but the post-season draft process has really hurt a couple of these guys. And I think this is where that kind of commitment comes in.
Yeah, I think a lot of these guys, like it's ironic that most of the times a lot of these guys grew up and, from not wealthy backgrounds, went through college in not wealthy situations. And this is the first time in their life they got a bunch of money. And, what kind of maturity do they have? What kind of family situation do they have? And I think all that kind of comes to light in the last, 3 to 6 months where, I had teammates or I had friends or I knew some people that signed with an agent. First thing the agent did was write the player a check for $25,000 and said, hey, here, this will help take care of you. And what's that going to look like? And, I know that when they get drafted in the NFL, that changes, but we went from having a stipend of $900 a month to getting $25,000 overnight right after the bowl game. I saw one of my guys, one of the guys on my team got a check shortly after and saying like, wow, well, that's different. What are you going to do now? And when you're 21 years old, 22 years old, I mean, that's a significant amount of money. And what's that going to do for your family situation? What that's going to do for your life? So, I mean, yeah, there's lots of opportunity out there. And I mean, that's pennies compared to what that guy made in the rest of his career.
Mhm.
But, it's just interesting to see how it all plays out. And I think that there's some players that, they don't have the maturity to handle those situations and it changes their life to the negative.
Mm-hmm. This is a bit of a different path, but that just reminds me, like when I got laid off, I got a severance, and that is definitely the biggest check I'm ever going to get in my life. And I started thinking like, oh man, I could have some fun with this. And I don't have the prospect of tens of millions of dollars down the way. The only thing that kept me was I had a wife and a financial person who would have literally killed me if I just, I'm going to go to Vegas for a month. But like for these kids who think and some of them know, but some of them think like, okay, I'm going to have millions and millions of dollars and this is never going to stop. That is a real test to the patience and the maturity of a young person. Because at 31, I was prepared to be an asshole. So at 21, that would be really tricky.
Yeah, when I was getting ready for the draft in 2000, I'll have to look it up now. I can't remember the player's name, but the number one overall projected draft pick that year, like ESPN boards right out the gate, number one, he ended up going like late third round.
Ooh.
And then he was playing for the Edmonton Elks in 2013 or 14. So, I mean, imagine what his agent gave him for money right away, thinking he was getting $35 million shortly after.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that player when he did his pro day, he didn't have a great pro day, didn't have a great combine. Well, just telling him he was the first overall pick, was that the worst thing that ever happened to that player? I don't know. But, everybody's situation different, everybody's past different. But I've seen some players that have, tried to, make it work as best they can. Some of them worked out great, some it didn't work out.
Now, we talked about kind of factories and offensive line factories with Iowa and Wisconsin. We have to mention the factory that is Nevada, as there is going to be a little bit of Nevaditude in this draft, which, by the way, is the greatest saying, catchphrase, whatever, ever.
I appreciate that. I agree with that as well.
Give us a couple players to look at from the alma maters of Cody Fajardo, Colin Kaepernick, and John Bender.
For sure. So the three players that they project right now to get drafted, it's a quarterback named Carson Strong. There was rumors of him potentially going first round. Now, from the latest projections I'm hearing, they're saying third to fifth round. I thought he had a great senior season. So, that's something I'm always interested in when they have these guys projected great. They still have a great season and somehow they fall down the draft board. Did other guys come up? I don't know. I don't know how all that works. But, I was one of those guys as well where they said I was going to get drafted decently high. And then, I thought I had a great senior season and then they disagreed. But anyways, Carson Strong, I think, will be a guy that he'll be drafted. He's a quarterback. He's got a big arm. He's a pro-style quarterback. He's 6'5". I believe he's about 230 pounds, and he can look over defenses and make deep connections. University of Nevada was a pass-happy offense the last few years. He's got a wide receiver named Romeo Dubs, who they threw the deep ball all day long on teams. They're just looking for home runs, and they hit them pretty often. And there'd be some games where, Dubs would have 5 catches for 250 and 3 touchdowns. So he's a nice deep threat, and hopefully they can see him in the NFL as well. And then Cole Turner, the tight end. Nevada's actually put quite a few tight ends to the NFL over the last decade, between obviously Virgil Green being probably the most famous of them all, but some other guys have got into NFL rosters as well. And Cole Turner is a big body tight end that they used a lot in between routes with Carson Strong there, and he caught lots of touchdowns as well. So all 3 of those guys I would project kind of between the 3rd and 5th round, and we'll see where they're at and see what happens to them. And I'm really excited to watch their careers here moving forward.
Man, if Dubs ends up on a team that I cheer for, that's a jersey you have to get. That seems like a lock. That's a wonderful last name.
Yeah, even with the great last name, his first name's Romeo on top of that. Right. I mean, it's amazing name for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those ones, like, I don't know how there aren't thousands of Rambo jerseys walking around the streets of Calgary, because just how do you not get that jersey name, right?
And I mean, he was such a great guy too. On top of it, Kenyon was hilarious. Great guy.
in terms of kind of bigger picture NFL, this has been a wild offseason, and there's potential it could get even more wild with Deebo Samuel wanting out of San Francisco. There's talk that the New York Jets are the favorites to acquire him. That would change my tone on wanting to stay in San Francisco very quickly. But how much of a game changer is Deebo Samuel, and do you think that he ends up getting moved?
I mean, he's a huge game changer. The things he was able to do this year, especially between the run and the pass game and just having to locate him on the field at all times. He reminds me of a guy like Tavon Austin, but way better. You know, Tavon Austin was kind of one of those gadget players, but when Tavon Austin was on the field, you almost knew the ball was always going to him because he wasn't blocking nobody. Well, Deebo might go down there and hit you in the mouth too. Right. So he has another level to his game that's like, wow, I have to watch this guy and I have to watch him not knocking me out in the second level. And, you know, he's got lots of things he can do from, you know, pass catching, yards after catch, carrying the football. So, yeah, I can understand why Deebo's upset. I can understand why he wants to be paid more. And if they are going to run him as much as they are, you know, what's that going to do to his body? What's his longevity in his career going to look like when he's getting 100+ touches a year? So, I mean, I can understand, you know, what his situation looks like. And he looks at all these other NFL wide receivers making $25 to $30 million. Everybody wants a bigger piece the pie, and he's no different. And I think that these teams in the NFL, you know, whether it's DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, teams are looking at moving wide receivers. I mean, if you have a top 10 draft pick, you can probably get these guys. Yeah. But if you don't, well, they're not moving for third-round picks. I'll tell you that right now. So, you know, if teams want to ante up and pay, then, you know, that's something that they could look into. And the Jets, you know, they got lots of draft capital, it sounds like, and they need something there on the roster. If that's something that works for them, great. But you have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think he'd be a perfect fit for Kansas City. But 29 and 30, I don't think is getting that one done.
No, I don't think so either.
A lot of movement, like we said. The Raiders bring in Devontae Adams, which warms my heart. The Chargers have signed everyone. The Broncos have reshaped their offense. You've had a lot of moving parts in the NFL. As we sit right now, and obviously a lot can still change, is there a team that stands out to you as the favorites right now?
You know, I can't tell you for certain until after the draft. I mean, right now, obviously, you look at the Rams. I think that they brought back a lot of pieces, and they won a championship last year. If Aaron Donald's back and causing a lot of ruckus in the middle, that's obviously a great fit and a great team, great roster. Kansas City is interested in me. I know they lost Tyreek Hill, but you know, what are they able to get in this first round? If they're able to get a couple of first-round wide receivers, or maybe a wide receiver, and maybe they address their offensive line or the D line, you know, maybe there's always trades on draft day. So, you know, I would expect in the first round we'll see 4 or 5 different trades. Maybe it might be a big player being moved. Maybe it's picks for next year. So, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of teams, you know, the Chargers or somebody, the NFC West, the AFC West, those are 2 divisions. I think that, you know, good chance that one of the Super Bowl champions is going to come out of there because there's lots of Super Bowl contenders between the 2 divisions.
Last one for you. The Toronto Raptors are clawing their way back into their series. You can see the Kawhi picture over my shoulder. I don't know if the Raptors come back and become the one in 143, but I love that they're putting the fear of God in Philadelphia. If nothing else, just making them question everything they believe in for these last few days has been a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody who's played basketball, I think that you got to be a bit of a Raptors fan because you're seeing a team that, you know, do they have a bona fide superstar? Did they go out and find a bona fide superstar? A lot of those guys were developed from within or acquired from trade packages. And all they did was they said, we're going to get a bunch of 6'7" to 6'9" guys, and we're going to be a headache to play against. And we're going to play great defense, and we're going to, you know, shoot the 3 ball on you. We're going to find ways to, you know, be a bit of a pest. And, you know, you look at the 76ers with Embiid and Harden. I mean, those are 2 pretty good villains for, you know, a team like us to cheer against and, you know, see. And if they lose, I mean, I think we're all happy. So, yeah, we'll see what plays out here. But I'm excited to watch the Raptors. And if, you know, they've been, you know, we need to give the Raptors more credit. They've been hands down the best professional sports team, you know, without CFL related from, you know, NHL, NBA, MLB, the best, you know, sports team in Canada for the last decade. They continue to have playoff success. They're one of the model franchise of the NBA. They've won a championship. You know, I think there should be a lot more Raptors fans in Canada than there is, and I hope that they keep building. And you know, as we can see, the next generation is going to have more and more Raptors fans, and I hope it keeps going that way.
Couldn't say it any better, and a great way to end it off. Bender, thank you as always, man, for this, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, for sure. Thank you.